Audio Unleashed. Who's going to kick us off this week?
I never get to kick us off. Well, I always kick us off.
Wait a minute. Make up your freaking mind.
I'm always babbling about something. So you kick us off.
Okay, I'll kick us off. Damn it, now I don't know what to say.
Sorry.
You stumped me.
It's a very special Audio Unleashed.
Why is it very special?
Because we have a very special guest on today.
Oh, that's true. We do have a very special guest on. Yeah. Do you want to talk about that? Well, wait a minute. Our very special guest is coming in the second segment. So
right. So we'll have to talk about that. People will have to wait with anticipation.
Right. For 15 seconds.
For 15 seconds, yeah.
Yes. So anyway, we're going to start off this week talking about an app that you actually sent me a link to.
Yeah,
this
Subzone.
is Subzone Subwoofer Placement Optimizer app, that is a mouthful. But this was created by a British startup, Sonic Baum. I guess that's how you pronounce it. Yeah. Yeah. Mobile app that helps you optimize the position of your subwoofer. I tried it out. I paid 99 cents for this thing. So that is how much I care for you, dear listener. I paid money to help you out. It's actually really, really cool. So we're going to talk about that. And then what are we going to talk about and with whom?
In our second segment, we're going to talk about a trend in audio that's been one of the biggest things that people have been discussing for the last couple of years. And we're going to bring in Stephen Stone, a longtime audio writer, at least since the early 90s, which is when I met him. And he has coined a term. We're going to figure out exactly what that term is. Yeah. But he's calling it oligarch audio, which means he's referring to, there's a whole class of speakers and amplifiers and things that have come along in the last probably 10 years, but certainly in the last 5, where these $50,000 DACs and $100,000 amplifiers and $200,000, $300,000 speakers are becoming kind of the norm at a lot of audio shows. And also the biggest feature in a lot of the audio publications. Yep. So we are going to talk to Stephen about where this trend is going, why he coined the term oligarch audio, and if in fact that is the best term, because I have my own ideas. And we will come to some sort of amusing, we hope, judgment and analysis of this trend and talk about how valid it is and how important it is to audio
Unleashed
listeners. And for our last segment,
for regular release,
regular people.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I like that phrase or not.
Irregular people.
For our mass market release, our last segment, so we had made a passing reference in the last episode to the Facebook page of our friend and Soundstage founder, Doug Schneider, and a conversation he was having about network audio switches and audiophile grade network audio switches. And I thought that was just about as crazy as you could get in terms of audiophile insanity, but we have found crazier. Yeah. So there's a Facebook page that you and I both belong to, and just for the sake of not getting censored, we'll call it Audio BS. That's not the full name. You can figure out what it is. But there was a post on here. Someone had found a post from a gentleman called Paul Pang, where he is selling PPA tuning jumpers. And these are basically Ethernet cables that are like 6 inches long, and you don't run them between one network switch and the other.
Right.
You plug them both ends into different ports on the same network switch.
The signal is not passing through them.
The signal is not passing through it.
Do I have that correct?
You have got that correct. And he has got 6 different models and different colors. And each of these claims to have a different EQ profile. And so you can plug them in alternately to supposedly change the quality of the sound that ends up at your audio system if it is passed through your home network.
Interesting. I'll be fascinated to hear your discussion about whether or not this works.
Will you know?
What could be the answer? How do you know if you haven't tried it?
Oh boy, yeah. We'll get there. We'll get there. And finally, for our Patreon subscribers, what are we going to wrap up with this week?
We are going to talk about a recent tumultuous thing that lots of people are complaining about to me, like normal people who aren't audio nuts. Not normal. Some of them aren't actually normal, but they're
normal's boring.
Well, they're people who aren't audio nuts, but maybe normal or abnormal or unnormal or whatever. So I'm not passing judgment on the validity of being an audio nut or not. But we're going to talk about Spotify, which is a service that you and I both use. And Spotify, after umpteen years, has finally bumped its prices up by $1 from $9.99 to $10.99. And except with, they've been talking about doing high res service and all this kind of stuff, but with no real apparent changes in sight for no improvements, nothing extra there for the listener. And we're going to talk about all the implications of that and why anybody bothers to subscribe to Spotify in this day and age. So, right. Shall we segue gracefully to our discussion of the subwoofer positioning app?
I've never done anything gracefully in my life, but we'll try.
I'm not even arguing with that.
Good. So how'd you find out about this app, Bubba?
I read about it I am a subscriber to a magazine called Audio Express, Audio Express. Hey, they could steal our branding. They could be like Audio Express.
But, and you also write for them in addition to... I do
write for them on occasion.
Yeah, and in addition to Wirecutter, and you used to be with Soundstage Solo, and you used to be with Sound Vision.
Yeah, we should do a little intro. So I've done all that stuff, and you are Dennis Berger. You are a 20-plus year veteran of the audio writing career, so to speak.
Good job, buddy.
And you are currently writing for Soundstage, Wirecutter. You have written for Home Theater Review, Home Entertainment. Don't tell me.
I don't even remember.
Like Residential Systems and some, more custom installation type publications and Cinelux and, whoever pays you enough money to make it worthwhile to get you out of bed.
Well, okay, yeah. And in addition to all of the others that I said, you were the editor-in-chief of Home Theater Magazine, right?
Yeah.
You wrote for Sound and Vision. You've done some writing for Audiophile Review and Home Theater Review and many, many, many others. So now people know who we are.
And
so anyway, in addition to writing for Audio Express, you happen to read Audio Express, which I'd say that's a pretty good endorsement.
And we should say right now that it is a journal, a sort of quasi, well, it's not quasi, it's a technical journal. It kind of combines a little bit of consumerish sort of coverage, but the reviews, they have reviews, but the reviews are really in depth. And, with a lot of measurements, because everybody that writes for them is like, I'm like the dumbest guy that writes for them. Everybody else is like been an engineer for 50 years or they have a doctorate in something. And so this publication has a newsletter that goes out that everybody should subscribe to because it's free. And you can see some of these stories. And so they posted a thing about this. It's a British app, which may be why it didn't get a lot of coverage in American publications. And Audio Express, I think, technically is an American publication by an American company. However, the editor, João Martins, lives in Portugal and is kind of Eurocentric. So that's probably why we didn't see much mention of this. But now that we're talking about it, everybody's going to be talking about it because everybody listens to the Audio
Unleashed
podcast.
This is going to be the first app to sell out. They're not going to have any more apps. They're going to be like, nope, sorry, we've sold them all.
Anyway, so Dennis, I turned you on to this app, but I didn't actually. I just thought you might be interested in it because you're a big home theater guy. You're really into subwoofer stuff, and so tell us about this app a little bit. And what's so special about it?
The app's pretty cool in that. So you fire it up and it basically says, hey, like we need some information about your room. Like what's the width? What's the depth? What's the height? And you can do it in metric or imperial. And then they're kind of like, okay, what are the materials? Your walls, are they studs with insulation, studs without insulation? What's your ceiling construction? What's your floor construction? Are you on a traditional foundation? Are you on a slab? You got carpet? You got hardwood? And you give it all of these descriptions of your room. And then it's like, okay, we got that. Now, where do you sit? Right. And you can do different seating positions. And then once you get all of that plugged in, it generates basically a heat map of your room showing positions where you could put the subwoofer and color coding of, red. Well, it's sort of more like a magenta equals, this is not a good place for a sub, towards the lighter the blue gets, the better it is for sub placement. And, it's basically calculating your standing waves and giving you positions to where, a subwoofer would be good here if you're sitting here. And it will also give you predicted frequency response. Basically, what impact would the room have on a flat frequency response signal sitting here if your subwoofer were here? And you can sort of move the subwoofer around this little map and see how that changes the frequency response. Are you getting more nulls? Are you getting more destructive reinforcement or constructive reinforcement, right? Is it boosting the signal? Is it cutting the signal? What happens? And that can sort of inform how you're going to place your subwoofer. And it takes a lot of the guesswork out of it.
So this is basically, you can find your subwoofer positioning without having to do the classic subwoofer crawl.
Yeah.
Right. And you can find it kind of instantly, as opposed to with the subwoofer crawl. What you normally do is I put on something with a melodic bass line, like maybe a Steely Dan tune. And I put the subwoofer where my seat is, and then I crawl around the room to find the best position for the subwoofer where the bass line sounds the most even, right? And so, which is obviously a hassle to do, because crawling is no fun. Not for a typical audiophile.
Right. And also, one of the things
gentlemen often.
Yeah. One of the things this app made me realize, one of the shortcomings of that also is this thing calculates your ear height. Or it asks you to plug in your ear height, right? And it's calculating that into, okay, you're assuming your subwoofer's on the floor. What's your ear height? You can't really do that as well with a subwoofer crawl unless you're, I don't know, willing to put your subwoofer up boxes in your seat or something like that.
Well, I've actually done that, but but anyway, it's basically a way to save you a lot of time and hassle, and it's $1. And so you actually tried it, and did it work well in your room?
It did work well, but that doesn't tell the whole story. It actually helped me make a decision about my room.
Which what? What color to paint it?
No. So this room has been my home office since, 1998.
Yeah.
When I set it all up, I put my desk by the window so I could look out and, see the mailbox and kids walking by and, look at my plants and stuff like that. Right. So that wasn't really a problem until we started recording a podcast. Right. And now it's like, I've kind of been thinking maybe I want to move my desk to the other side of the room so I can control noise a little bit. But that left me a problem with what to do with my stereo system, because my stereo system is on the long wall opposite my desk. And I can basically, I rotate my chair 90 degrees and I'm looking at my stereo system. So if I were to move my desk over there because of the placement of doors and stuff, it would mean having to move my stereo system to a short wall in this room. And I've always sort of hesitated to do that because it's like, well, I wouldn't be able to get my speakers quite as far apart. Now we're talking about the difference between a 12-foot wall and a 10-foot wall. So it's not major, but it's always been like, do I really want to do that? And where would I place the sub? What's funny is on the long wall where I've got it, I've always had trouble with sub placement. And to make my sub really, really sound good, I have to use Dirac or parametric EQ. There's a couple of little spikes I have to EQ out. And I've always thought, well, whatever. Anyway, within 30 seconds of using this app, I tried it out. Whoa, wait a minute. What if I put my system on that wall? And what if I moved my chair there? What would that do? And all of a sudden, I realized there are so many more good subwoofer placement options if my room is set up that way than it is the current way. Just like twice as many good places to put a sub if that's the way I'm orienting my system. And a lot of that has to do with where I'll be sitting, but also just the dimensions of the room and the way standing waves work. So yeah, within 30 seconds, this thing helped me make a decision that I've been vacillating about for 6 months now.
Oh, that's cool. So that was worth $1, huh?
That was worth $1 all day long and twice on Sundays. Yeah.
Wow. And so we should probably, did we mention that this company was founded by Sonic Baum? It was founded by Chris Baum, Baume, who is a lead research engineer at BBC Research and Development. That's a British broadcasting company. That's the same people that brought you the LS35A monitor, among many others, or the monitor design. And, so this is a serious technical organization. And he's kind of apparently a leading engineer there, and he's been at it for 15 years. So there's a little appeal to authority for you. The guy seems to know what he's doing. And according to your experience, this is a cool thing. So it's $1. Yeah. I mean, when's the last time you found normally like any app, like there's good apps for free. Yeah. And there's good apps that are like $13, $14, $15. But like, I haven't seen an app for $1 that was worth anything in a long time.
They're more rare for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he makes clear when you launch the app, it's like, hey, we're still working on this, man. This is new. Like this might change a little bit. Don't judge it. No, I guess they can't tell you not to judge it, but they're going to let you know. They're letting you know it's only going to get better from here. We've just started with this. So even in the state it's in, it's worth $1. If they make substantial improvements to it, I think they're probably going to raise the price, but it'll probably be worth it.
It looks really good. This is not something somebody cranked out.
No. And just looking at the predicted frequency response graphs, that they put some serious work into this thing. So
yeah, so I would recommend people check this out, because especially since this guy's other app is called Snug, and it's a white noise app. So it uses audio analysis to detect when a baby cries, and it uses soothing white noise sounds to help put the baby back to sleep.
Yeah.
So I would say the market for that is potentially about 1 billion times greater than the market for a subwoofer app. So
probably.
So if you get a copy of this, maybe he'll think, oh, well, this is a market worth addressing, and I should spend some time on this rather than make my billions of dollars on my other app that puts babies back to sleep. Because good God, how valuable is that?
Yeah. It also says at the end of this Audio Express story, he led the production tools work of the European Union project Orpheus on object-based audio. I'm not familiar with that project. Are you?
Oh, yes. Of course.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I consulted on it. They called me up and asked me what I think of Orpheus. And I said, oh, that's awesome. No, I never heard of it. I'm supposed to say I'm the Brent Butterworth, so I should have heard of everything, but I haven't.
Yeah.
I'll confess.
Orpheus is a completed European Commission Horizon 2020 research project that pioneered the development of an end-to-end object-based media chain for audio content.
Oh, congratulations. You can work Google. It's a big step up for you, pal.
Oh, boy, you're getting snarky. I think you need to take a break and go sit in the corner and think about your life choices for a minute.
I think we might amp up the snark, because in our next segment, audio journalist Stephen Stone is going to join us. He is the leading expert on oligarch audio, because he coined the term. So he gets to define everything about it. And then we will interview him about this. I was going to say disturbing, but I don't know. It's a new trend. Whether or not you're disturbed by it, I guess, is dependent on how much money you're making from it.
Yeah, it depends. It depends on if you're one of the 8 human beings on the planet that can afford this stuff. So.
Come on. There must be 8. There must be 8. We have 700 something billionaires in this country, dude.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
So, and then, you don't have to be a billionaire to. That's the new pitch line for this stuff. You don't have to be a billionaire to afford it. You could be a mere future, 100 millionaire.
100 millionaire. Yep. Boy, that's a tagline.
Costs less than a private jet.
Wow. What a bargain.
Let's take a little break with some music and come back with Stephen.
Okay, bye. And welcome back to the Audio Unleashed podcast. I'm Dennis.
And I'm Brent.
And we are joined in this segment with a very special guest, Stephen Stone. Stephen, many of you probably know from The Absolute Sound. He also wrote for Stereophile. For many years, he was the head of Audiophile Review. Actually, where I first came to know Stephen is he's been writing for Vintage Guitar Magazine for as long as I've been subscribing to it. It's one of the few print magazines I subscribe to.
Yeah, so it's funny. My hi-fi writing is what got me the guitar writing gig, but that's another story. But I did over 250 monthly columns about acoustic instruments for Vintage Guitar Magazine.
Wow. Yeah. Brent, it was your idea to bring Stephen in today. So why? What are we going to talk about?
Because as you mentioned in our last podcast, Stephen coined the term oligarch audio, which I thought was hilarious and totally on point. And Stephen, being a longtime observer of this industry, I think I first encountered Stephen in about 1993, and he was already very well established. And so I kind of thought it'd be good to interview him about why he came up with this term and what, describe the trend he's talking about. And then we can kind of talk about whether or not that trend is good or bad or whatever. Just kind of dig in and have some fun.
Okay. Well, I first used the term in print in 2014 in an article in Audiophile Review. I was reminded about that by Jerry Del Cagliano recently, because he thinks I coined it. Since I speak English, I very seriously doubt that I originally coined it, because I do think in English, and probably someone else said it beforehand. And I always come back to the famous picture of the two Russians sitting, having breakfast with their major stereo behind them. But I think the trends for oligarch audio started with Harry Pearson.
Really? The founder of the Absolute Sound.
The Absolute Sound. Harry always wanted to have the premium, the most expensive component that a manufacturer had available. Mm-hmm. He always reviewed the most expensive piece. And near the end of his life, when he really wasn't producing as many reviews as he wanted, gear just piled up because he wanted it, and it was something he was interested in, and it was always the premium stuff. And he sort of developed this idea that whoever dies with the best toys wins.
Yeah.
Which is kind of the essence of oligarch audio.
Yeah.
So I have to ask, though, why? But an oligarch is like a super ultra rich business person, right? Who has a lot of, who presumably has a lot of political influence, like in Russia. So Harry did care a lot about audio.
Oh yeah.
Do these oligarchs, do the people that buy, and can you give us a couple of examples of pieces of equipment right now that would be classified as oligarch audio?
Thrax.
And what's that?
THRAX. Thrax their gear starts at about $100K.
Okay. And they make amps or speakers or what?
Electronics, primarily electronics.
Okay. And who else? Name a couple more.
Well, let's see. Some of the Solution products.
Okay, that's Soul, SOUL.
Yes, exactly.
Solution, yeah.
OMA. Actually, OMA are very odd because they make one product that is a high-value loudspeaker in the $16,000 to $20,000 range that I've heard in several different setups, the Fleetwoods. They're really, really good. I mean, I've heard them with $200 amplifiers. I've heard them with $20,000 amplifiers. And the damn things are really, really exceptionally good speakers. But everything else in their line, the next speakers up are a $50,000 two-way horn that's like, meh. And then it goes up into the multi-hundreds. It's just like, come on now.
Some of those speakers that look like SpongeBob's alarm clock, just this great, big, awful contraption.
Well, I mean, there is a place for something like Wilson Audio WAMs.
Sure.
In a very large room that's well damped and well controlled and set up, designed around the loudspeakers, and they will produce a result that will amaze you. But if you're spending, what are these things up to now? I mean, obviously they're over $100K. What are you going to spend on your room to justify that? That's where it really gets into Oligarch Audio, because to have gear that costs that much money, to justify it, you need a room that can really deal with that gear.
Yeah. Well, my question is, do the people that buy this stuff, are they really into audio, or are they people who are just like, oh, we should have a stereo system in here. Let's just find the super high-end dealer around here and go to him, and he'll say, oh, this is the best, and here's a $100,000 amplifier. And given the growth in the number of billionaires and 100 millionaires, there's a lot of people running around for whom spending $200,000 on speakers is just nothing.
Well, yeah, but I think where it becomes a problem is for the average consumer, because they start assuming that you have to spend that kind of money to get good sound, and we all know that is not the case.
Yeah,
and being able to have the proper criteria to be able to judge whether something is good is something that is very difficult for people.
Yeah.
Stephen, what do you think? Is there any danger in this trend toward products that start at $200,000 in a product line? Do you think it hurts the market overall, or do you think it's just noise?
That's a really good question. I think it depends on the viewpoint of the person perceiving the information. For someone who's educated and understands the way electronics work and has some grounding in common sense, I think you kind of go at a certain point, yeah, that's great, but for somebody whose budget is looking at say a $5,000 system and it can be debilitating, and they go, oh, it'll never sound any good because there's this really good stuff out there. Yeah, but we know that there are ways to make again, within certain parameters, you can make a $5,000 system sound as good as a megabuck system. It's going to be in a small room, though. I mean, I've always believed that I can take any system in the world, I don't care what it costs, and within 15 seconds, I can make it sound like crap. I mean, I'll wager money that I can do that either by just turning up the volume control, or just moving something just a little bit, or I mean, there's just so many. There's no system that is perfect in every situation. There's no system that's always absolutely the best. I can take great gear and put it in too small a room and it'll sound like crap. I can take great gear and put it in too large a room and it'll sound like crap.
Yeah.
The whole thing is system matching, and the system starts with your room. Rooms aren't sexy. Talking about room acoustics is probably the least sexy thing you can talk about.
Oh, crap. We're in trouble.
Well, it is. Let's face it. It is. But it is the most important thing, and is the thing that people look at as an afterthought, which is really unfortunate. But we're getting off subject of oligarchs, obviously. Okay. Yeah.
But we found this article from, because obviously other people have commented on this trend, because if you go to the hi-fi shows, there is just a lot of this stuff. Yeah. And especially if you go to like the Munich show, which is the big sort of world showcase for high-end audio, there's just tons of this stuff there. And Jim Austin, the editor of Stereophile, wrote an article titled On Value. And he was saying that, he's, kind of supporting this notion of these extremely expensive products. And he's saying that these manufacturers are, quote, taking advantage of freedom from cost constraints to more fully achieve hi-fi goals. And I read that and I thought, I know of examples where manufacturers have told me they're just making something because their dealers asked for something more expensive, not because it's better. And
there's that term,
so I wanted to see how you feel about that.
Aspirational audio, the concept that you're going to aspire to more than you can afford currently.
So they're making these as flagships that people can buy the cheaper version.
I understand what the marketing trend and spiel is, but at the same time, it's offensive. You guys have mentioned it, and I've mentioned it in print. There's a book called Status and Culture by W. David Marks.
We talk about it all the time.
Yes, you talk about it all the time. And I think that is one of the essential elements of aspirational audio, and the fact that you have to show a picture of it and show that you own it. And we get into the fact that when you go into Facebook and see pictures of people's aspirational audio systems, even if they're not from an audio show, which about 90% of them are, they have the gear set up like it's at an audio show.
Yeah. And, I have so many friends on Facebook. They're Facebook friends. They're not people I've ever encountered in the real world. I get so many friend requests on Facebook and I'll usually, if they look like the real deal, I'll
if they're not axe murderers,
If they're not axe murderers or obviously fake or if it's just people, and if it's people who have 15, 20 friends in common with me, well, okay, I'll probably do.
And posted something in the last 5 years.
Yeah, and I look at their website and it's clear. I look at their Facebook page and it's audio. I'll approve it. But some of these people just put pictures of a piece of gear and they'll say, audio note, whatever. And they'll just have a couple pictures of it on Facebook.
Yeah, what does that mean?
Okay.
What are they trying to say to you?
These? Is it? It's almost like you put a picture of, I don't know, Pamela Anderson on Facebook. It's like Pamela Anderson. I guess I'm just supposed to look at that and go like, ooh, baby, or whatever. She's not my type, really, but whatever.
Whatever your object, it's objects of desire, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess that's it. That's it. Objects of desire. Yeah.
It would be sort of like, me taking a picture and going, disc brakes.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I suppose there are some people who do that. I don't know.
When we're talking about value, you can get gear from Topping or SMSL or Sebage or Gustard.
Oh, yeah.
That's really, for under $500, you can find digital gear from any of those companies that will blow your mind.
And also, speakers, like one of my favorite speakers of the past few years was the Sonus Faber Lumina 5. Mm-hmm. It's $3,000 a pair. And it looks like, well, I don't know. How do you judge what a speaker looks like its value is? But it's incredibly well made. It's got, the beautiful wood finish. It's designed with this great plinth and these amazing looking feet. It looks like if I didn't know what hi-fi cost, or if I wasn't in, if I didn't know where the Lumina line was, I would look at it and say, well, it's like a $5,000 speaker. It's $1,500. And sounds amazing, so
out there.
Yeah, it is. It's out there.
My favorite LS35A is a Chinese one. I had the Falcon Gold badge, super duper one, and broke it in and do all those things and compared it to it. And it was like, yeah, there's more top end. Yeah, there's more bottom end, but the mid range isn't as good. Why do I want this? Sold it. Kept the little Chinese one.
And there's a Triangle Audio Borea BR03. It's $400 a pair. It sounds awesome. It keeps winning blind tests with that I do, and it measures like perfectly.
Yeah,
and
I reviewed a Triangle
really good speaker
10 years ago. I don't even remember what model it was, but I was very impressed with the fit and finish, the quality overall, the sonics. Yeah, they had everything together. It was a high value product. And there are so many high value products out there. I don't know about you guys, but I have a hard time keeping up on it all. I mean, that's one of the other thing, the segmentation of our industry. I mean, if I was reviewing Oligarch gear, and there are a couple of reviewers who specialize in that stuff. I couldn't review inexpensive gear and have any frame of reference to it. I mean, that's one of the other things you get in as a reviewer. You have to specialize nowadays because there's so much gear out there and it's such a wide spectrum of gear. You can't be a generalist anymore.
I agree.
Well, and also, I think if you have spent appreciable time with something like the Lumina 5 or something like the Monitor Audio 7th Generation Silver 300, speakers like that, where just stunning performance for less than $3,000. I think it's really, really hard to then go and make the case for an $80,000-$90,000 speaker, unless you're just talking about pure SPLs, right?
Well,
I mean, unless you just want to write about fit and finish or, things like that. But most audio writers don't do that. They try to justify the price in terms of performance, which is, I think, where they fail.
Well, I never would ever claim that the differences that a reviewer hears, they actually don't exist. Very often, the reasons they give for the differences they're hearing, that I have issues with because so many reviewers don't have the technological background. They're not engineers. They don't have the experience to know why something is doing what it's doing, why they're hearing what they're hearing. And Harry was notorious for that.
Yeah.
He always attributed it to the particular piece of gear that he put in his system, but never considered the overall system and its overall balance and how really he was just system matching, not really coming up with something that was necessarily better.
So I have a question. If $200,000 speakers did not exist, would $100,000 amplifiers exist?
Ooh. It depends on the purpose, I think, of the product. If there were inexpensive speakers that were exceedingly difficult to drive, that required a class AB discrete amplifier to drive them because their impedance and their phase issues were sufficiently difficult that a Class D amplifier, which tends to have some load variation changes, wouldn't be sufficient to drive them, then they might need an amplifier like that.
But we talk about, some of our colleagues talk about how, you kind of need this $100,000 amplifier to drive this $200,000 speaker, which is inevitably going to be a big tower speaker with probably some sizable woofers. However, you can easily go buy a Parasound amp for $3,000 that will drive any speaker ever made.
Yeah.
And in many cases, better than the $100,000 amplifiers will, because a lot of those amplifiers are kind of have some kind of exotic technology that may or may not actually be all that robust.
Or they've been voiced. When they use the word voiced comes up, the alarm bells go off. That and iconic are the two words that if I see that in advertising copy, the red flags, serious red flags. But
I wanted to say also in terms of the amps, like the HypX Encore. That's like a $2,400 amp, or you buy it in products around the price of like the NAD C399. Really, really affordable. I dare you to find a speaker that amp wouldn't drive, and it's load invariant. It is amazing Class D technology. And it's maybe some of those crazy Apogee speakers from back in the day it might struggle with, but other than that,
I own the Apogee. I'm such a masochist. Not only did I own the original Apogee full ranges, which were a 4 ohm load. They weren't too bad. They were just big and physically so delicate. Heavy wind and you could wipe out the tweeters there. But anyway, I own the Scintillas, which were a 2 ohm, true 2 ohm speaker. I blew up a lot of amplifiers with those things.
Yeah, I bet.
In those days, there weren't very many amplifiers that you could drive with them. Yeah, you could go out and buy Krells, but try to cheap out and drive with American Eagle, the John Iverson amplifiers, you'd blow the suckers out. I did.
I remember those. But people keep citing that as like an example of like, oh, well, there's, Apogee. But like they went out of business in about 98?
There are so few pairs of working scintillas out in the world. Between the physical delicacy and shipping them was almost impossible, and a hard drop, and the drivers, which were basically a large piece of foil, would just get flopped out of place, and you'd have to replace it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems to me that a lot of hi-fi products, super, the Oligarch audio, or as I've been saying to Dennis, Oligarch-Fi, which is a little more derisive. But a lot of these products exist just because people are buying. It's like, oh, well, you have a $100,000 amplifier. Well, you need at least a $50,000 DAC to go with that, right?
Yeah, system matching. And you got to spend
at least a few $1,000s on your cables, but it's economic system matching rather than audio system matching.
But so few people understand the fundamentals of audio reproduction, so that's really the only metric they have.
True.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, you're right, Dennis.
You got this really expensive thing and it's really nice room. You're not going to cheap out. You don't want to cheap out. That's that expression, cheaping out.
Stephen, I want to ask you one last question before we go.
Okay.
When your name has come up with regard to Oligarch Audio and just the crazy excesses of all of the prices for some of this stuff, I've heard you accused of just being jealous. You're just jealous because you can't afford this stuff. How do you respond to that?
Well, I basically can call up almost any manufacturer, and because of my credentials at the Absolute Sound, get something to listen to. But why should I buy gear that I can't hear a difference just because it's more expensive and therefore other people say it's better?
Yeah.
That would be very illogical. So I choose not to review super expensive gear because A, I have no frame of reference, and B, it may do things that I can no longer hear that other people can hear. So why should I go, well, I can't hear it, so it's no damn good.
But how likely do you think it is that it's actually doing things that you can't hear?
If I can't hear them, why do I care? It's sort of like, once I'm dead, do I care if somebody believes in God or not? Not really.
Oh, man.
So it's a personal and pragmatic point of view based on A, where I'm at personally, and B, kind of looking at the whole industry and deciding what would be important to people and what do I want to devote my time to. And I'd rather devote my time to reviewing gear that other people can also enjoy.
Yeah, it's a really good way of putting it.
I think I serve the greater good that way, as opposed to reviewing gear that maybe only 100 people in the world could ever afford.
Yeah. Yeah. In which case, in my opinion, you're part of a marketing team more than being an audio reviewer.
Yeah. Well, yeah, every audio reviewer is marketing.
Oh, true. That's true.
But the editor of a magazine who fired me once said, the primary point of an audio magazine is that it is always a good idea to buy new audio equipment.
But, as we all know from reading that book, these publications exist to some extent to provide the alibi for buying the gear. Yeah. So you're spending $500,000 on an audio system because it's going to get you closer to the music, and the writers tend to dutifully say, yes, this blah, blah, whatever, incredible, they go on and on and on. And I got to tell you, I kind of know a little bit about music, and I can get as close as I need to with the music, with the stuff that like you've been reviewing, the topping amplifiers and the little, I haven't heard those little LS35As, but I really want to. And it's like a good set of speakers and an amplifier that can drive them is awesome. That tells me what I want to know about the music. I am not, believe me, the people that buy the $100,000 speakers are not getting any more insight into John Coltrane than I have. Probably a lot less.
But they're a member of that club, that special club.
No one's going to be impressed by the audio systems I would choose. Well, the audio systems I test now are all cheap, but no one's going to be impressed when they walk in they'll be appalled, but not impressed when they walk into my house and see all the audio gear.
Yeah.
No one's going to be like, whoa, what's that? That looks really cool.
Yeah.
They'll just be like, why do you have all this stuff?
I've said before, I think some of this astronomical gear, the point of it is not that the oligarchs can afford it, right? I think the point of it is that you can't, right? that's where its value lies. Not that they can have it, that you can't have it.
And the rationalization is that we're going to learn things that can trickle down to less expensive gear. We all know how trickle-down economics work, though. So I don't think trickle-down electronics works any better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Stephen, thanks so much for joining us, man. It's been really fun talking to you.
Thank you.
That was my pleasure. Anytime.
And we're back. This is Audio
Unleashed.
And for our last segment, we are going to talk about something that we found on a forum, a Facebook forum that we like called Audio. We'll shorten it and say BS because we don't want to get flagged as what is it? Indecent?
Explicit. Yeah.
Indecent would be okay, but explicit, no. Because we know we have a wholesome listener group here that would be offended by the use of any untoward language.
Yeah. We're basically the Little House on the Prairie of audio journalists.
Of audio. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good night, Dennis.
Good night, Paul.
So I never actually watched that show. Oh my God. For a kid in the 70s who's listening to like Rush and Led Zeppelin to watch Little House on the Prairie.
Yeah, that would have destroyed your cred just a little bit.
Not going to happen. Anyway, we are here to talk about something we saw on the Audio BS Facebook page, which we recommend, by the way. It's amusing. This is a bunch of, actually, you brought this to me, so why don't you explain it?
Yeah, so the original post was basically a bunch of photographs from the Facebook page of a gentleman named Paul Peng, who he's selling network audio switches and also Ethernet cables and LAN patch cables.
Okay.
So related to the conversation that we had before about whether or not there's any validity to audiophile Ethernet switches, take that one level further. And this guy is claiming basically that you can take these little patch cables that are they look to be about 6 inches long, and there are a bunch of different colors of them. And apparently each of those different colors has different sonic properties. And so you don't run them between one network switch and another. You plug one into one port on your network switch and another into another port. The other into another port.
Is that right?
On an unused port. And then supposedly any audio that passes through that network switch then is EQ'd. And he's got this thing where he's like listing the different cables, and he's got all of the cables broken down into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 EQ bands, right? And he shows you how like the Pearl cable is in the low frequencies of 4 out of 5 and the high frequencies of 4 out of 5, but in the mid, low, mid, and mid high, it's a 5 out of 5. But then if you want your low frequencies intact and you want to roll off on the high frequencies, you go with a Sapphire, which is a 5 in the low, mid, and mid high, but then a 4 in the high frequencies. And then the gold's like a 3. And it's insane. And
so let me ask you, as an audio expert, if I can interject, as an audio expert and someone who I have observed knows a great deal more about computer networking than most audio experts do. Can you explain to me what the mechanism by which these things would attenuate, by which an Ethernet jumper cable could attenuate certain audio frequencies or not?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It couldn't, I mean, the information that is going through these network switches from, a server somewhere to your computer or your DAC or streamer or what have you, they're delivered in packets, right?
Yeah.
We call it packetized data. And I don't think that most people understand how tiny these packets are. Like, the smallest ones are like 21 bytes, right? And I think the biggest packet of network data is, I want to say, like half a megabit, right? That's like the biggest chunk of data that can move through a network. And so each of those packets not only has a little segment of the data that's eventually going to be reconstructed in a file, but it tells, hey, here's how this all fits together to create a file or a stream or what have you, right? And so, error correction is another part of it. Basically, if the server tries to send a packet to your computer, part of the communication exchange is, hey, I received this one. Hey, I got that one. Hey, there was a problem with that one. Could you resend it? Right. Yeah. And it's not necessarily in order. It's not like, the first packet that comes through is the first half of the first note from Love Lies Bleeding or anything like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not random, but there's these little bits and pieces of the file that then becomes your music are just sort of deconstructed and sent willy-nilly with their little instructions of how to put them back together at the end. So well, let me ask you this. What if, all right, so an Ethernet cable has 4 twisted pairs, if I'm not mistaken. And so what if, you designed those twisted pairs to where they had a filter sort of function to them, like maybe they slightly rolled off the frequencies above X kilohertz or megahertz or gigahertz or something. What would be the effect on the data? Well, I mean, you couldn't do that in this packetized form again. But like when we talk about,
do it. Well, what if I did that? What if, Dennis? What if I put a little, resistor capacitor network?
Okay. I get what you're saying.
On each of my 4 twisted pairs. What if I took my cable apart and did that, and I set it for X frequency, right?
Right.
Megahertz, kilohertz. I don't know. You pick your frequency.
Yeah.
What would happen to the data if you did that? Would it roll off the treble?
No, it wouldn't.
It wouldn't. Why wouldn't it roll off the treble?
Well, first, it's operating at a way higher frequency, right? Like way beyond anything you could hear.
Okay.
But again, it's even if it weren't, that is. When we were having that original conversation on Doug's Facebook page, I made an analogy, right? I was fortunate enough to see Nina Turner give a speech a few years back here in Montgomery, Alabama, an amazing orator. And, I said, claiming that the power supply in your network switch can improve the clarity of a music stream would be like me saying that I could tell that they had just washed Nina Turner's bus before she drove into town because of the clarity of her voice. Yeah. That's the kind of ridiculous we're talking about here. And to take that one step further and to say, you could put these jumper cables in, like, I don't even know how you could extend that analogy. I mean, I guess it would be like saying if I tied a rope between 2 doors on the bus, that would change the quality of her speech in the church an hour later. I mean, it's just,
I should point out,
it's ridiculous.
Let me point out that if you did high pass filter or low pass filter or high pass filter or whatever, let's say you high pass filtered this Ethernet jumper cable through, I don't know a whole lot about switches, but it seems to me like there's nothing passing through it. I mean, there could be, but probably not, since you're on 2. Nothing's going to happen. Basically, your signal is not going to go through this jumper and be affected.
No.
And even if it did, if you say you low pass this, so all the high frequencies are above some frequency are attenuated, then what's going to happen is the bandwidth of the cable will be reduced. And at some point, if you reduce the bandwidth of the cable is small enough, it's no longer going to pass the Ethernet signal.
Yeah.
And so you're going to get nothing. You're not going to get, a subtly softer, mid-range.
He says the Platinum M cables sound mellow, where the signature LAN cables provide the huge details over full frequency range. Just
so let me ask you this, Dennis.
Yeah.
Let me ask you the question. The question so many people have asked me in the past. How do you know it doesn't have an effect if you haven't heard it, if you haven't tried it? How do you know, Dennis?
Well, that word know is doing a lot of heavy lifting, but I mean, I think anyone who understands anything about how networking works would instantly just know there's just no mechanism, right? What is the mechanism? If you're going to make claims like he's making, you need to explain the mechanism, and he doesn't, right? So what he is claiming is completely contrary to our understanding of the way networking data is transmitted, right?
Yeah.
So if he weren't contradicting that in any way, right? If what he was saying had, no bearing on how networks work, then maybe you could go, oh, okay, prove it, right? I guess. But I mean, it's almost like, if I said, I'm gonna walk outside right now and I'm gonna jump up and I'm gonna take the moon and put it in my pocket. Yeah. Would you be able to say, well, if you haven't seen him do it, don't claim he can't, right? No, it's just like I'm making a claim that defies the laws of physics, right?
Right.
So, I'm not the one that needs to debunk this. He needs to explain the mechanism. He's making the extraordinary claim. I am not. I'm just saying, here's how networking works. It's as simple as that.
I think that's really it, is that, look, just because you don't understand something, I'm not saying you,
right?
Saying the royal you. Just because you don't understand something doesn't mean somebody else doesn't understand it.
Right.
A lot of this is maybe a big mystery to some people, but there are people that understand the mechanics of this stuff. Just like, if you just to take an extreme example, let's say an esteemed audio writer in New Jersey snapped his fingers. What effect would that have on my audio system here in the Seattle area? What immediate effect would it have? Well, it would have, I don't have to have him try that. And I don't have any particular person in mind, but I don't have to have him try that. I don't have to call him on the phone and say, okay, snap your fingers now. Yeah. And then listen, because I know how fast sound travels, first of all, number one. Number two, I know, what's it take, like 3 hours to get across the U.S. at the speed of sound? Sure. And then I also know what the amplitude of that snap is going to be about 70 decibels. And I know that sound diminishes with the square of the distance, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I can calculate roughly how loud that's going to be at, say, 100 meters or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is like at 100 meters, that snap is very likely to be buried in the noise floor of whatever, unless you're in a giant anechoic chamber. And so that noise would be swamped by the 10 zillion things in between here and New Jersey that make noise. So it's like a radio signal coming from a planet that's, 100 light years away. Well, there's so much other crap that radio signal is going to encounter before it gets to planet Earth that you're going to have a hard time picking it out of the noise. And I know that snap is just not going to even exist in the context of all the other noise. So, we can look at things like that. We can understand that certain things don't have an effect on sound.
Mm-hmm.
If someone happens to show up at an audio show with some doohickey that they say does something, why can't we just say that doesn't work? It doesn't do anything. Well, there's only one reason we can't say that, and that's because we want that company's advertising. But we at Audio
Unleashed
are not courting audio manufacturers advertising as of yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
We will if we ever. I don't think we will. But if we ever do, then we'll take a second look at this issue. We wouldn't be any worse than so many other publications. It'd be like, oh, well, gosh, you just don't really know until you try it. And don't try it blind, because the left brain, right brain, something or another, you have to try it sighted. And only then can you really know if it works and something blah, blah. But
there's another thing that bothers me. I don't know if I mentioned this or not, but it very much disturbs me that he wants to have the appearance of being very scientific about all of this.
Of course.
You know, a post that he did a day ago was, you know, I'm doing these A/B tests between this Platinum M and Signature LAN cables. And the Signature LAN cable, by the way, costs, I saw this somewhere, I lost it. A Signature LAN cable costs $800 for a 20 centimeter cable. Mm-hmm. And 3,000 for a 1 meter. So yeah. And so he's talking about doing A/B testing between them. And it's just like, okay, who was involved with this test? Okay, what was your methodology? Okay, is this blind?
A sighted or blind test?
Correct. And none of that. But he wants, you know, I mean, I think he is well aware of the fact that if he simply says, oh, I did an A/B test, then that's giving the appearance of some sort of scientific-y thing, right?
Yeah, people pull that on us all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, they're like, oh, well, we A/B tested it with a bunch of people. It's never, I know audio writers who are like, oh, well, I've done, you know, ABX tests with amplifiers and I passed it. I got a perfect score. It's like, okay, well, publish the test then. Tell us what the methodology was. Tell us who conducted it. Tell us what the amplifiers were, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What the level matching methodology was, which is not a problem with Ethernet cables, et cetera, et cetera. Tell us what the methodology was and publish it. Don't just sit here and say, I can sit here and tell you, Dennis, that I've bench pressed 500 pounds. But it doesn't mean anything unless I could demonstrate it, or I could have a bunch of third-party reliable people say, yeah, Brent bench pressed 500 pounds. And, you know, we weighed it on a scale and it was 500 pounds. I can't bench press 500 pounds, by the way. Yeah. And also you can look at me and go like, yeah, this guy can't bench press 500. And you don't have to, you don't have to be me. You don't have to see me try it to know I can't bench press 500 pounds.
Yeah.
All right. There's things that we know in life without directly witnessing them. I know that if we were on the surface of Venus, we would die right away. I don't have to go to the surface of Venus to know that we would both die instantly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because like what, 800 degrees there?
Like 900. 800 something Fahrenheit. Yeah, I think you're right.
Pretty hot. So yeah. Okay. Shall we wrap this thing up?
Let's wrap it up, man.
Let's do. Who produced this?
Oh, this is a Butterburger production.
Oh, nice. That's you and me.
Yeah, that is me and you. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
And I think it's my turn to mix and master and edit.
Wait, it's all of your name, but only half of my name.
Oh, we need to talk to Carnell about that. We need to go back to the drawing board.
It's kind of like, you remember Bach Manatee from Silicon Valley?
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of like that. And you're the Ehrlich Bachman, and I'm Big Head. I guess that's not too flattering for either of us. Well, whatever. Let's just delete this whole conversation. That went no. I didn't really think that out too well.
Yeah. Oh man. Anyway, what are we doing for music this episode, man? You're recording some new stuff.
I think we have a new piece by the Butterburger house band, right?
Oh, are we going to use that for bumper music?
We'll try. We'll see what people think.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let us know in the comments section how much you think our music sucks.
Yeah.
And then we'll you can choose any of the innumerable pieces of music I've already composed for this.
Okay. Cool.
And the intro and outro music is mine. But no, do we have any other credits we have to give? Oh, thanks to Stephen Stone for being on.
Absolutely. We should say thanks to Stephen. That was great having him on. And yeah, so anyway, I guess for most of you, this is goodbye. For patrons, stick around. We got one more segment for you, and we'll get to that pretty soon.
Cool. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Hey, thanks for sticking around to the end. If you liked what you heard and wish there'd been a little bit more of it, we got some good news for you.
Indeed, we do. If you check out patreon.com/Audio Unleashed, all one word, you can get new episodes a little earlier than everybody else.
And sometimes it's like a day or two early. Sometimes it's nearly a week. We never really know until we start editing.
But the big plus is that you get extended cuts of every episode. And usually that's going to mean a whole extra segment that's about maybe a geekier topic or something that's a little more personal to us or something that's just going to really appeal to the hardcore Audio Unleashed listener.
Yeah, what it boils down to is if you're somebody who would support Audio Unleashed on Patreon, we're going to make sure the bonuses to every episode are really aimed straight at your interests.
Yeah, and so if you want to hear these segments, you can subscribe to our Patreon for $3 a month, which is less than I spend every single day on my cup of coffee when I go to Starbucks to write my boring articles.
Yeah. One more time with that URL, that's patreon.com/Audio Unleashed.
Or Audio
Unleashed. Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.